There was a note on my nightstand that said, "Don't drink tonight's tea." I thought it was a joke until I saw my son's fiancée pour something from a tiny amber vial into my cup. She smiled when she noticed me watching, like nothing happened. That smile hasn't left my mind since, because an hour later she was the one losing control, and nothing about that night felt accidental. You think you know betrayal? Try watching the person who tried to erase herself instead. My name is Margaret Hale, though everyone just calls me Maggie. I'm 66 years old and I've lived alone for the past 2 years in a little cedar house at the edge of Ashwood, Oregon. It's quiet out here. Too quiet sometimes. The kind of quiet that feels heavy like the air after a funeral. My husband David passed away from a heart attack 2 springs ago. Since then, it's just been me, the piano he loved, and the sound of the rain on the roof. He used to play on Sunday mornings, hymns mostly, until the neighbors started calling our porch the chapel on the hill. Now the piano just sits there, a little out of tune, like it's waiting for him to come home. When you lose someone you love, you start measuring time differently. It's not months or years anymore, it's before and after. And for me, everything has been after for a long time. So when my son Noah called to say he was coming by for a visit, I nearly cried from relief. I hadn't seen him in months. He's a therapist, the kind who helps other people untangle their lives, while his own seems to stay just out of reach. He works too hard, sleeps too little, and says things like, "Mom, you've got to take care of yourself." When he showed up that Saturday morning, he wasn't alone. There was a young woman with him, tall, beautiful, glowing like she'd stepped out of one of those health magazines you see at the doctor's office. She smiled the kind of smile that makes you feel instantly smaller. "Mom," Noah said, looking proud and nervous all at once. "This is Clara Monroe." "Clara," I repeated, shaking her hand. Her fingers were soft and cool, like she'd just come from somewhere calm. "It's such a pleasure, Mrs. Hale," she said. "Noah talks about you all the time. Your house, your garden, your piano. He says it feels like home." That word, home, landed heavy in my chest. For a moment, I believed her. We sat in the kitchen where sunlight came through the curtains in soft stripes. I offered coffee, but she pulled a small jar from her bag and said, "I actually brought my own tea. It's my own blend. Lavender, chamomile, lemon balm. Helps clear the mind." She said it like she was offering a miracle. While the water boiled, Clara asked about David, how we met, how long we'd been married, what kind of man he was. Most people avoid those questions. It hurts to talk about someone who's gone, but it hurts worse when no one asks. "He loved to fix things," I said. "Even things that didn't need fixing. I think it made him feel useful." Clara smiled softly. "That's beautiful. At my retreat, we teach that love doesn't die. It just changes form. Sometimes the people we lose are waiting for us to let go." I didn't know what to say to that. I just nodded and stared at my cup as she poured the tea. The smell was sweet and heavy, almost floral enough to make me dizzy. Noah reached across the table and touched my hand. "Mom, Clara runs a place called Cedar Valley Retreat. It's up in the mountains, totally peaceful. They do therapy, meditation, herbal treatments. She's amazing at what she does. I think you'd really like it there." Clara added, "We're starting a new program next month, a kind of reset for the soul. You'd love the quiet, the walks by the river. Sometimes healing just needs a change of scenery." Healing. That word again. Everyone keeps using it like it's something you can buy or schedule, like a spa appointment. I smiled, mostly for Noah's sake. "I'll think about it," I said. "That's all I ask," Clara replied warmly. "Just think about it." We talked a little longer. She told me about her work, about helping people release old energy. It all sounded harmless enough. Too harmless, maybe. Her voice was soft, steady, the kind of voice that could convince you the house was on fire and you'd still feel calm. When she stood to wash the cups, I noticed something odd. The tea leaves in my cup had drifted apart, scattered across the bottom like a little storm. But in hers, they'd settled perfectly, forming a neat spiral right in the center. Clara caught me looking and smiled again. "Lavender does that when the energy's balanced," she said. Noah chuckled. "See, Mom? She's full of wisdom." "You'll love Cedar Valley." I wanted to say I wasn't sure about that, but I didn't. I didn't want to ruin his excitement. After they left, I sat alone at the table. The house felt different, too still, too sweet. The scent of that tea hung in the air long after they drove away. I picked up the empty cup to wash it, but something stopped me. A single lavender petal floated in the leftover water, spinning slowly in the shape of an eye. Maybe it was just how the light hit it. Maybe I'd been alone too long. But for the first time in months, I felt a chill crawl up my spine, and I couldn't shake the feeling that that cup of tea, and the woman who poured it, had just changed something I couldn't take back. The morning we left for Cedar Valley Retreat, the sky looked pale and heavy, the kind of gray that makes you pack a sweater even in July. Noah insisted on driving. Clara sat up front beside him, hair tied back neatly, humming a soft tune that drifted between us like fog. I sat in the back seat, watching the trees pass by, tall pines swaying gently as if whispering secrets to one another. Oregon has a way of swallowing you whole with its beauty. The roads twist through the mountains like ribbons, and sometimes the mist rolls in so thick you can't tell if you're climbing or falling. Clara talked the whole way, not loudly, not obnoxiously, just steady, calm, and sure. She spoke about energy, about how every person carried invisible weight that needed cleansing. Most people, she said, walk around with their pain packed so tight inside them, it starts leaking out in ways they don't understand. That's why they get sick, or forget, or lose themselves. Noah nodded along like a student proud of his teacher. That's actually true in psychology, he said. Repressed trauma can manifest physically. I didn't say anything. I just looked out the window at the fog curling around the trees. The truth is, I liked silence more than any theory. When we stopped for gas halfway up the mountain, Clara stepped out to stretch. She lifted her arms toward the sky and breathed in deeply, like she was taking communion from the air itself. Noah went to grab coffee. I stayed in the car. From where I sat, I could hear Clara talking to a couple who had just pulled in. Young, maybe in their 30s, wearing matching Cedar Valley sweatshirts. She hugged them both like old friends, then began explaining something about an upcoming cleansing circle. It's all about surrender, she said gently. When you let go, the light does the rest. The woman looked nervous. Does it hurt? Clara laughed, that soft, practiced laugh that always sounds like she's smiling even when she isn't. Only if you resist. When she got back in the car, she caught me looking at her through the rear-view mirror. Most people are scared of surrendering, she said. They think healing means control, but it's actually the opposite. I murmured. Sounds risky. Clara turned slightly, her eyes kind but sharp. Nothing grows without trust, Maggie. The way she said my name made it sound like a test. As we climbed higher, the fog thickened. I could barely see the curves in the road ahead. Noah lowered the music and asked Clara to tell us more about how she started the retreat. Her smile softened. It began with my father, she said quietly. He was very sick, not physically but mentally. They called it dementia, but I never believed that. I leaned forward a little. What happened to him? For years, she said, doctors filled him with pills that made him worse. He forgot names, faces, entire months of his life. They said it was irreversible, but I knew better. I knew it was just energy trapped in the wrong places. Noah asked, So what did you do? I brought him into the light, Clara said. Literal light therapy, meditation, sound, herbs. Within weeks, he stopped wandering. He remembered our family photos. He even started smiling again. That's wonderful, I said, but something in her tone made me uneasy. Not what she said, but how sure she was. Then she added softly, He didn't lose his mind, Maggie. He just let others control it. People forget. Our minds are fragile things. If we let someone else shape them long enough, they stop belonging to us. Her words hung in the air like a chill draft through the window. I forced a smile. That's quite a thought. Clara nodded slowly, eyes still on the road. It's the truth. No one really goes mad on their own. Someone always helps them get there. For a second, I felt my heart catch in my chest, because somewhere deep down, I'd had the same fear ever since David died. That without him, I'd slip into confusion, that one day I'd wake up not remembering his voice or the way he whistled when he cooked. I used to tell myself it was just grief. But now, sitting there between the fog and Clara's soft-spoken certainty, I wasn't so sure. We passed a wooden sign that read Cedar Valley, 2 miles ahead. The trees grew thicker, older, their trunks dark with moss. The air smelled of pine and wet soil, like the earth itself was breathing. Clara's voice softened. You'll love it here, Maggie. Most of our guests say they feel reborn after the first night. There's something special about this place. It makes you remember what peace feels like. I nodded, though I couldn't tell if the peace she meant was the kind that heals you, or the kind that makes you forget who you were before it. Noah glanced back at me. "You okay, Mom?" "Fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just thinking." Clara turned again and smiled that same gentle smile. "Don't think too much here," she said. "That's what we're trying to quiet." As the car rounded the final curve, the retreat came into view, a cluster of wooden cabins nestled in the mist. Wind chimes hung from the eaves, and rows of lavender lined the walkway, like a border between this world and something softer. At the entrance, a wooden archway stood over the gravel road. The letters carved into it were faded and uneven, almost erased by rain and time. "Trust the process." The words caught in my throat. I stared at them as we passed underneath, and for a moment I thought about the last time someone had told me to trust anything. It was the night David went into surgery, and the doctor had said the same thing. Now, 2 years later, I was driving into another place run by people who promised healing. The trees closed in, behind us, muffling the outside world until all I could hear was the hum of the tires on the gravel and Clara's soft humming up front. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But as we crossed that gate, something inside me tightened. Because sometimes when people tell you to trust the process, what they really mean is, stop asking questions. Breakfast at Cedar Valley was quiet, almost too quiet. No clinking dishes, no chatter, just the faint sound of birds outside and the steady hum of some kind of meditation music drifting through the dining hall. Everything about this place was designed to calm you, even if it had to force you into it. Clara greeted everyone with the kind of smile that looked effortless but never quite reached her eyes. "Good morning, beautiful souls," she said, gliding between the tables in her white linen robe. "Today we begin with intention, and with tea." She moved toward me, her bare feet silent against the wood floor. "Maggie, I've made you something special," she said. "Ginkgo for focus, ashwagandha for balance, and valerian for rest. It's gentle but strong, good for memory, good for the heart." She placed the cup in front of me like it was a sacred offering. The steam curled up and brushed my face. It smelled earthy and sweet, with something sharper hiding underneath, a note I couldn't quite name. I tried to smile. "You remember everything, don't you?" She laughed softly. "That's my job." Across the table, Noah sipped his coffee and looked relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. He'd always been anxious, rushing through life as if he was late for something important. But here, under Clara's gaze, he looked peaceful, like he'd handed over the wheel. Maybe that's what worried me most. I lifted the cup, hesitated, then took a sip. The taste was mild, floral at first, but bitter after it cooled on my tongue. Clara noticed. "Bitterness means it's working," she said gently. "The body resists what it needs most." That sounded like something you'd read on a poster in a doctor's waiting room, but I nodded anyway. For the first few days, I tried to follow the program. Morning meditation, afternoon breathing sessions, herbal workshops in the garden. Clara floated from one room to the next like a ghost made of sunlight. Everyone adored her. I wanted to, too. But by the fourth day, things began to feel off. It started with my vision. I'd be reading a magazine and the letters would blur together, swimming like minnows on the page. Then came the moments where I'd lose track of time, standing in the middle of the hallway with no idea what I was looking for. When I told Clara, she smiled like a mother indulging a nervous child. "Oh, Maggie," she said. "That's a good sign. It means your old memories are leaving your body. You're cleansing." "Cleansing?" I repeated. "I thought that was what showers were for." She laughed softly, the way people do when they want you to feel silly but not angry. "The mind has to let go before the body can rest. You'll feel lighter soon, I promise." Noah seemed to believe her completely. "Mom, it's probably just the detox," he said. "They warned us that our systems might react at first. I didn't want to argue." He looked happy, and I didn't want to ruin that. But something about it didn't feel right. I wasn't sleeping well. My dreams were strange, half-remembered flashes of David's face fading into fog. Every morning I woke with a pounding in my head and the taste of metal in my mouth. That's when I met Elena Torres, the young nurse who'd been quietly moving through the retreat since the first day. She couldn't have been more than 24. Warm eyes, dark hair tied back, always polite. She wasn't part of Clara's spiritual staff. She handled the real things: bandages, checkups, blood pressure cuffs, the things you could measure. One morning she stopped by my table during breakfast. "Mrs. Hale, may I take your vitals after breakfast?" "Of course," I said, grateful for the company. When she came to my room later, I noticed her eyes flicker toward the shelf where I kept my medication. Blood pressure pills, vitamins, a mild antidepressant my doctor had prescribed after David's death. "Do you mind if I check your bottles?" she asked gently. "We like to make sure everything's stored safely." I handed them over. She studied the labels for a moment, her brow furrowing. "Did you open these recently?" "No," I said. "Why?" She hesitated. "It's probably nothing, but this seal, it looks new, different from the factory seal. Did someone repackage them for you?" I shook my head. "Clara helps me organize my pills sometimes. She said it's part of my routine, keeping things simple." Elena's expression didn't change, but her eyes softened in that careful way nurses do when they're trying not to alarm you. "I see," she said quietly, then smiled. "Let's make sure you're drinking enough water, okay?" When she left, I felt that same flutter of unease I'd felt the first time I saw Clara's tea spiral in my cup. By the end of the week, my forgetfulness got worse. I mixed up words in conversation. I'd walk into the wrong room. Once, I set my shoes in the refrigerator and didn't remember doing it. Clara noticed my confusion, of course. She'd noticed everything. At dinner one evening, she placed her hand gently over mine. "You're doing beautifully, Maggie," she whispered. "I can tell your body is letting go. It's shedding what it doesn't need." "What if it's shedding too much?" I asked softly. Her smile didn't falter. "Trust the process." Those words again. Always those words. That night, the air in my cabin felt heavy. The scent of lavender was stronger than usual, almost suffocating. I couldn't sleep. I tossed, turned, finally gave up. When I sat up, the faint glow of the moon slipped through the curtains, washing the room in silver. And that's when I heard it. The soft click of a latch opening. At first, I thought it was the wind. But then I saw her. Clara. She was standing by my medicine cabinet, her hair loose around her shoulders, wearing that same white robe that made her look more angel than human. Her back was turned to me as she opened the cabinet door. The sound of glass bottles clinking together filled the silence. "Clara?" I whispered. She froze. Slowly, she turned toward me, her expression perfectly calm, too calm. "Oh, Maggie," she said softly, smiling as if I just interrupted her saying a prayer. "You startled me. Go back to sleep. I'm just making sure everything's in order." Her voice was light, but her eyes were dark and steady and knowing. And as the moonlight caught her face, she tilted her head slightly, that same gentle smile returning. "Trust me," she whispered. Then she closed the cabinet, turned off the light, and slipped out the door. I sat there in the dark for a long time, listening to the wind whisper through the pines, wondering if she just saved me from something, or if she'd already started taking something away. That night, as I watched Clara's shadow fade through the crack in my door, I realized I didn't know which scared me more, what she was doing with my medicine or how calm she looked doing it. The morning after I caught Clara at my medicine cabinet, I told myself it must have been a misunderstanding. Maybe she really was checking on me. Maybe I was being paranoid. That's the thing about living alone for too long. Your mind becomes both your friend and your enemy. The next day was rainy, the kind of Oregon rain that doesn't fall so much as drift. Quiet, endless, soft as breath. Most of the guests were in the yoga hall, but I couldn't focus on meditation or herbal rituals. My thoughts kept circling back to the look on Clara's face when she found me awake, so I stayed in my cabin. The place felt smaller than before, like the walls had crept closer in the night. I decided to tidy up, hoping a little order might calm my nerves. That's when I found it, David's old suitcase tucked beneath the bed, still smelling faintly of cedar and aftershave. I hadn't opened it since the funeral. Just looking at it made my throat tighten. But something inside me whispered, "Open it, Maggie." Inside were folded sweaters, a half-empty bottle of cologne, and the leather notebook he used to keep tucked in his coat pocket. At the bottom, under a stack of old sheet music, I found a yellowed envelope with my name written in his handwriting. Shaky, but still unmistakably his. I sat down on the bed before my knees gave out. My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter was short. David was never one for long goodbyes. "My Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. At least in the way we understand gone. Don't let anyone tell you forgetting is healing. It's not. Memory is what keeps us alive, even when our bodies quit. If someone ever tells you to take something to help you forget, don't. Hold on, even when it hurts. Love, David. I read it 3 times, then pressed it to my chest and cried until the paper went damp in my hands. Later that afternoon, Clara stopped by my cabin with her usual bright energy. She carried 2 mugs of tea and that warm, practiced smile. "I thought you might like some company," she said. "It's been a heavy day for everyone. The storm brings out the melancholy." I nodded and motioned for her to sit. The steam from her cup curled between us. "Clara," I said slowly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," she said. I hesitated, feeling foolish already. "About the medication? The supplements you've been giving me. How much exactly should I be taking?" Her smile didn't falter, but something in her eyes sharpened. "Just what I've set out for you, Maggie. You don't need to worry about the details. That's why you have me." I fidgeted with the edge of my sleeve. Sometimes I feel foggy afterward, forgetful. Clara leaned forward slightly, resting her chin on her hand. "That's normal," she said gently. "It's part of cleansing, your mind letting go of what it no longer needs." I must have frowned because she laughed softly. "Think of it like this," she continued. "Trust Maggie is a lot like medicine. Take too little and it won't work. Take too much and it can make you sick." She said it like a joke, but her tone had an edge that made me uncomfortable. "Are you saying I should trust you in doses?" I asked. Her smile deepened, but her eyes stayed cold. "Exactly." The conversation drifted after that, but the words stayed with me long after she left. Trust needs a dose. It sounded less like advice and more like a warning. That evening, I sat by the window, holding David's letter in my lap. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy with that damp, earthy smell that comes before a cold night. The retreat was quiet. Too quiet. From across the courtyard, I could see Clara through the window of her office, bent over her desk, writing something. Every so often, she'd glance toward my cabin, as if she knew I was watching. When the lights finally went out, I went to the bathroom to wash my face. The mirror was slightly fogged, the air still thick from the hot shower I'd taken earlier. For a moment, I stared at my reflection. The tired eyes, the silver in my hair, the faint tremor in my hands. Then, slowly, another shape began to form behind me in the misty glass. It was her. Clara's pale reflection stood just over my shoulder, her face unreadable, her eyes fixed on mine. I froze. My breath caught halfway between my lungs and my throat. I didn't dare move. "Clara?" I whispered. The reflection didn't move, not a blink, not a breath. I turned around so fast, I nearly tripped over the rug. The room was empty. The only sound was the soft drip of water from the faucet. I turned back to the mirror. My reflection stared back at me. Alone again. But for a heartbeat, just one, I could have sworn I still saw her eyes in the glass. Calm, patient, waiting. That night, I tucked David's letter beneath my pillow and whispered, "I won't forget, love. I promise." But as I closed my eyes, one thought kept circling in my mind, slow and cold as the fog outside. If Clara was right that no one loses their mind on their own, then maybe someone was already helping me lose mine. They called it healing through scent. It was the kind of workshop Clara loved, soft lighting, low music, and that endless tone of calm she carried like perfume. We were in the glass-walled therapy room, surrounded by potted lavender and shelves of tiny amber bottles. The air smelled like a garden after the rain, sweet, dizzying, almost too much. Everyone sat in a circle on woven mats. There must have been 10 of us, women and men of all ages, wearing the same white cotton robes that made us look like part of some gentle, smiling cult. Clara stood in the center, radiant as always. "Every scent tells a story," she said, holding up a small bottle of peppermint oil. "Some remind us to let go, some to forgive, and some to trust." She opened the bottle and walked around the circle, offering each person a drop on the wrist. "Breathe in," she whispered. "Let it carry you somewhere safe." When it was my turn, she smiled at me with that same look she always had, patient, a little pitying, like a teacher indulging a difficult student. "This one's for you, Maggie," she said softly. "It helps with control." "Control?" I asked. She nodded. "Sometimes we hold too tightly to what's already gone." Her words stung, and not because she was wrong, but because she said them in front of everyone. I rubbed the oil between my palms. The smell hit me fast, sharp and cold, the kind of mint that makes your nose sting and your eyes water. I coughed once, then twice. My head began to ache, a tight pulse behind my eyes. Clara's voice floated somewhere above the pain. "If it burns," she said sweetly, "it means you're resisting. Let the body open." Around me, others were sighing contentedly, eyes closed, swaying like they were hearing music I couldn't. One woman actually whispered, "I feel lighter already." But I didn't feel lighter. I felt sick. I tried to breathe through it, to look calm, but the room tilted slightly and I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall. Pale, trembling, out of place among all the serene faces. Clara's gaze found me again. "Maggie," she said, her tone still soft, but with something steel beneath it. "Perhaps you're not ready to release control yet." A few people turned to look at me, my stomach twisted. "I'm trying," I managed to say. She tilted her head, all sympathy and condescension. "Healing isn't about trying. It's about trusting. Maybe next time you'll feel ready." The others nodded, murmuring little sounds of agreement, the kind people make when they're sure someone else is the problem. I could feel my face flush. I wanted to get up, to walk out, but Noah was sitting across from me. When our eyes met, I waited for him to speak up, to say something, anything. He didn't. Instead, he smiled weakly and said, "Imane, Mom, Clara's just trying to help you." Those words landed like a knife in my chest. Clara smiled approvingly at him, then turned back to the group. "Trust is like scent," she said. "Invisible but powerful. Once you learn to recognize it, you'll never mistake fear for faith again." She closed the session with a short chant, the others repeating after her, their voices blending into one long hum. I didn't say a word. The smell of peppermint clung to my hands, my hair, even the inside of my mouth. It made me want to gag. When it was over, everyone left in small, glowing groups, still murmuring about how transformative it had been. Clara lingered only long enough to touch my shoulder and say, "Don't be discouraged, Maggie. Letting go takes time." I nodded, pretending I didn't feel humiliated, pretending I wasn't trembling. When she finally walked away, I stayed seated, staring at the empty circle of mats. The peppermint still burned on my skin. That's when I felt a light touch on my shoulder. It was Elena Torres, the young nurse. She glanced toward the door to make sure no one was watching before crouching beside me. Her voice was low, urgent, the kind that carries fear even when it's whispering. "You're not crazy," she said. I looked up, startled. "What?" "You're not crazy," she repeated. "I saw her last night. She changed the labels on your medicine bottles." For a moment, I just stared at her, unable to speak. "She shouldn't be anywhere near your prescriptions," Elena continued, her words quick and quiet. "But she was there. I saw the new tape on the bottles. She's tampering with something, Mrs. Hale?" My throat went dry. "Are you sure?" Elena nodded. "I'm sure, but please, don't say anything yet. Let me handle it." She stood, giving my hand a quick squeeze. "I'll find proof. Just be careful." Then she was gone, walking out into the sunlight like nothing had happened. I sat there for a long time after she left, trying to steady my breathing. The mint still burned in my nose, but beneath it I could smell something else, the faint, bitter trace of fear. I wanted to believe Elena. God, I wanted to. But if she was right, what then? The air outside was full of voices, laughter, the smell of herbal oils and earth. The world kept turning like nothing was wrong, like none of it mattered. But something was wrong. I could feel it. It was in the walls, in the tea, in the way Clara's voice lingered long after she left the room. Trust smelled like mint, all right. Sweet at first, but sharp enough to sting when you breathed it in too deeply. I've never been good at sleeping in strange places. The air in those cedar cabins felt too clean, too still, like the walls were holding their breath. Most nights I lay awake listening to the crickets outside, the faint rustle of wind through the pine trees, and the slow, rhythmic creak of the retreat's old pipes. But that night was different. The sound that woke me wasn't the wind. It was footsteps. Light, steady, deliberate, passing just beyond my door. At first I thought maybe it was one of the guests heading to the bathroom, but the sound didn't fade. It stopped, then started again, then stopped right outside. I held my breath. For a long moment there was nothing. Then I heard the soft click of a latch somewhere down the hallway. The direction of it chilled me. It came from the medical room. My heart began to thump in that old, uneven rhythm that always comes before panic. Still, I pulled on my sweater, slipped my feet into my slippers, and stepped quietly into the hall. The air was cold and smelled faintly of eucalyptus and alcohol wipes. I moved toward the light spilling from the crack beneath the medical room door. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle, but I didn't open it. Instead, I leaned close and peered through the thin line of space between the hinges. And there she was, Clara, barefoot in her white robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. She was standing in front of the medicine cabinet, her face calm, almost reverent, as she peeled a label off one bottle and pressed a new one in its place. Even through the gap, I could read the words. The first label, melatonin. The new one, lorazepam, a prescription sedative. Strong. She moved with the precision of someone who'd done this many times before, unscrewing lids, pouring, shaking, sealing. Her movements were slow, practiced, and disturbingly peaceful. I wanted to move, to shout, to stop her, but my body felt locked in place, my heart pounding so loud I was sure she could hear it. Then I heard another sound, a faint, electronic click. I turned my head and saw just a few feet away, Elena, crouched in the shadows, phone in hand. Her face was pale in the dim light, eyes wide with terror but steady with purpose. She caught my gaze and raised one finger to her lips, signaling me to stay silent. I nodded, barely breathing. Elena held her phone up again, recording as Clara replaced the last label. Then Clara paused, looking toward the security camera mounted in the corner. A small, knowing smile crossed her lips. She reached up and, with one quick motion, switched it off. The red light blinked out. She planned this. Every bit of it. Elena's hand shook slightly as she lowered her phone. I saw her mouth a single word to me, go. I backed away slowly, careful not to make a sound, then slipped down the hallway to my room, every nerve in my body screaming. When I woke the next morning, sunlight was pouring through the window. For a moment, I almost convinced myself it had all been a dream. My head felt heavy, my mouth dry. Maybe I'd imagined everything. Maybe it really was the detox, the cleansing Clara kept talking about. But then I saw Elena at breakfast. She sat at a corner table pretending to check a clipboard, her eyes darting up only once, just long enough to meet mine. Her look said everything. It wasn't a dream. I waited until Clara left the room before leaning toward Noah. Something's wrong, I whispered. I saw Clara in the medical room last night. He frowned, setting down his fork. In the middle of the night? Yes, I said quickly. She was relabeling bottles. Elena saw it too. She was recording. Noah sighed, rubbing his temples. Mom, you were dreaming again? I wasn't dreaming. Mom, he said more gently now. The cabinets are locked. Only medical staff have keys. Clara doesn't even go in there. She was there, Noah. I saw her. He glanced around the room, embarrassed. Keep your voice down, he murmured. You're tired. You're scaring yourself. Please, let Clara handle your medication. That's what she's trained for. Trained for what? I wanted to ask, but I didn't. He wouldn't have believed me anyway. Clara appeared moments later, all brightness and grace. She kissed Noah's cheek, squeezed my shoulder, and said, How are you feeling this morning, Maggie? Tired, I said flatly. Good, she said, smiling. That means your body is finally resting. That afternoon, I stayed in my room. I couldn't stop replaying the night in my head. The flicker of the security camera light going out, the look on Elena's face. My stomach twisted every time I thought of those two words on the bottles. Melatonin, lorazepam. As the day faded into evening, I decided to make myself tea. Something familiar, something simple. I reached for the tin of chamomile leaves on the table and unscrewed the lid. Inside wasn't just tea. There, nestled among the dried flowers, was a folded scrap of paper. My hands shook as I pulled it out. The handwriting was rushed, almost desperate. Don't say anything. I'm watching. The words blurred as my vision swam. I wasn't sure if it was fear or rage, but I felt the ground tilt beneath me. Was it from Elena, a warning? Or from Clara, a threat? I set the note down carefully, staring at it like it might explode. The scent of chamomile filled the air, thick and cloying, and suddenly it didn't smell like calm anymore. It smelled like danger. I went to the window, half expecting to see someone outside, but the courtyard was empty. The only sound was the wind in the pines and, faintly, the echo of footsteps retreating down the hall. That night, I didn't sleep at all. Every creak in the wood, every sigh of the wind made me flinch. I kept the note beside my bed next to David's letter, like they were both pieces of a puzzle I hadn't yet solved. Somewhere beyond the thin cabin walls, Clara's soft laugh floated in the distance, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whether it was Elena or her, someone really was watching. It was late afternoon when Clara knocked on my door. The rain had stopped, leaving everything outside silver and shining, the air thick with the smell of wet pine. I'd been sitting by the window rereading David's letter, tracing his handwriting like it could still lead me back to him. Clara stood in the doorway, hands clasped, a warm light spilling around her from the hallway. "Maggie," she said softly, "I wanted to invite you to something special tonight. It's one of our most sacred traditions, the tea ceremony for the departed." I blinked, surprised. "For the departed?" She nodded, her smile patient. "It's a way of honoring those who've crossed over. We drink in remembrance to cleanse grief and release love. I thought of you. And David." Hearing his name from her lips sent a shiver through me. For all her serenity, Clara had a way of touching your heart exactly where it was most tender. "It's beautiful," I said quietly. "David would have liked that." "Then you'll come?" I hesitated. Every instinct told me to be careful, but the thought of a night dedicated to David, to something that wasn't about forgetting him but remembering him, felt like a kindness I couldn't turn away. "Yes," I said finally, "I'll come." Clara's eyes brightened. "I'm so glad. And Noah will be there too, as a witness to love between generations." She said it like it was poetry. I felt a small flicker of pride. Maybe, just maybe, this was what we both needed, a chance to heal, together. "Will Elena be there?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Clara's smile didn't falter, but her tone shifted just slightly, becoming softer, cooler. "No, dear. I've assigned her to the overnight care unit tonight. We want her full attention on the new guests. She works too hard as it is." Something in my chest tightened. "I see." "Don't worry," Clara added quickly, touching my arm. "Everything will be taken care of. Just rest before tonight. It begins at 9 in the glass pavilion." And then she was gone, leaving the faint scent of mint and lavender hanging in the air, calm, soothing, and somehow suffocating. Dusk fell slowly that evening. The retreat's cabins glowed like lanterns through the mist, and I watched the fog slide over the treetops like a moving sea. Inside, I tried to distract myself, brushing my hair, straightening my sweater, telling myself I was just being foolish. When I opened my drawer for my hairbrush, something slipped out from a folder I didn't remember leaving there. My medical file. For a moment, I thought one of the nurses must have left it by mistake, but when I picked it up, something fluttered out from between the pages. A small folded piece of paper torn from a notepad. I unfolded it slowly, my hands already trembling before I even saw the words. "Your tea has been switched. Don't drink it." My heart slammed against my ribs. I stared at the note, my throat dry. There was no signature, but I didn't need one. The handwriting was tight, rushed, and unmistakable. "Elena." For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the paper, trying to decide whether this was warning or panic. My mind raced. Had she seen something? How could she know? And if she knew, then Clara must have known too. By the time Noah came to walk me to the pavilion, the night had turned cold and strangely still. The forest was silent except for the crunch of gravel under our shoes. He was dressed neatly, his hair combed, his expression calm but distant, the way he used to look at his patients before giving them bad news. "You look lovely, Mom," he said, offering me his arm. "I'm glad you're doing this. It'll help." "Help what?" I asked. "Help you let go," he said, smiling faintly. The words made me want to pull my hand away, but I didn't. The pavilion was glowing when we reached it, glass walls reflecting hundreds of small candles flickering in the dark. A long table stretched down the center, set with porcelain cups and bundles of dried herbs tied with string. At the head of the table stood Clara, serene and beautiful, her robe flowing like liquid ivory. "Welcome, dear souls," she said as we entered. "Tonight we bridge the seen and the unseen. We drink not to forget, but to remember without pain." Her eyes found mine. "Maggie, you honor us by being here." I nodded faintly, my pulse quickening. My seat was marked with a small white card. "For David Hale, with everlasting love." The sight of his name written in Clara's perfect handwriting made my stomach turn. Clara began her speech, gentle and rhythmic, about grief and transformation. Her voice was warm, hypnotic, the kind that pulls you in until you stop thinking altogether. She moved gracefully down the table, pouring tea from a silver pot into each cup. Steam rose like ghosts between the candles. When she reached me, she smiled. "Yours is special," she whispered, "a blend to ease your memories, to make them peaceful." Peaceful. That word again. I thought of David's letter, hidden under my pillow. If someone ever tells you to drink something to forget, don't. I forced a polite smile, but my hands shook as she placed the cup before me. Across the table, Noah watched with quiet pride, unaware of the note in my pocket, unaware that my cup, the one steaming gently in front of me, samte might be something far more dangerous than tea. The ceremony began. Everyone lifted their cups except me. I stared down into the swirling liquid, pale gold, flecked with small purple petals. The steam curled upward, and for an instant it almost formed the shape of an eye. Clara's voice floated through the candlelight. "Drink and release." I felt Noah's hand on my shoulder, gentle but firm. "Mom," he whispered, "it's okay. You can trust her." But trust had started to smell too much like mint. I raised the cup to my lips, the warmth brushing my face. Around me, people began to drink, sighing, closing their eyes. And then, from somewhere behind me, faint and urgent, I thought I heard the soft rustle of paper. Elena's note, still in my pocket, whispering louder than any prayer. "Don't drink it." My hands trembled. The tea shimmered in the candlelight, beautiful and deadly all at once. I lowered the cup, heart hammering, pretending to wipe a tear. Clara's eyes met mine from across the table. Her smile didn't change, but I saw it, just a flicker, a glint of something dark behind the calm. She knew. The candlelight made everything look softer, faces, shadows, even fear. The meditation hall was glowing gold, filled with the quiet hum of burning incense and the sound of a nearby stream whispering through an open window. The air was thick with sandalwood and something else, something bitter underneath. Clara stood at the head of the circle, dressed in her long white robe. The candles painted halos around her as she moved. To the others, she looked like a healer. To me, she looked like someone rehearsed, perfect, practiced, and terrifyingly calm. "Tonight," she said softly, her voice floating through the smoke, "we celebrate transformation. We drink to release the pain of our past lives and awaken to a higher truth." Around me, the other guests bowed their heads in reverence. The floor beneath us was cool wood, polished smooth by years of footsteps. The flickering flames reflected on the glass walls, so it looked like the room was surrounded by firelight and ghosts. Noah sat beside me, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. His expression was peaceful, trusting. That same blind trust he'd had since the day he met Clara. And across from us, her eyes caught mine, full of that quiet power that had once made me believe she could fix me. I wasn't sure when I stopped believing that. Maybe it was the night I saw her in the medicine room. Or maybe it was when I realized how easily she could make my son doubt me. Clara raised the silver teapot. The steam rose in elegant ribbons as she began pouring tea into small porcelain cups, one by one, moving around the circle with slow, deliberate grace. When she reached me, she paused, just long enough for our eyes to meet. "For you, Maggie," she whispered, "a special blend for release. You've carried your grief long enough." She set the cup before me and moved on. The scent hit me first, floral, sweet, and faintly chemical beneath the lavender. I knew that smell. I'd been breathing it for weeks. I looked down at the cup, my reflection trembling in the golden liquid. My fingers shook slightly as I reached for it. "Are you all right?" Noah murmured. I forced a weak smile. "Just tired." He squeezed my hand. "It's okay, Mom. This will help." I wanted to tell him everything. About the medicine, about Elena, about the note hidden in my pocket. But his face looked so certain, so safe, that I couldn't. He'd stop me. He'd take her side. And if I was wrong... Clara's voice cut through the silence. "Now," she said, "we raise our cups to those we've lost, and to the new life waiting beyond the veil of memory." Everyone lifted their cups. I did too, careful, pretending my hands were trembling more than they were. And when she turned to pour another guest's cup, I saw my moment. Slowly, quietly, I shifted the cups, mine for hers. The sound of porcelain sliding against wood was swallowed by the music of running water and soft chanting. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. By the time she turned back to face me, her cup sat neatly where mine had been. She didn't notice. Not yet. Clara smiled as she lifted her glass. "To rebirth," she said softly, her voice smooth as honey. Noah smiled, following her lead. To healing. My throat was dry. To truth. Our eyes met one last time across the candlelight. She raised her cup a little higher, still smiling. I mirrored her. For a second, I saw something in her expression, a flicker of victory like a queen about to win a war. Then we drank. Or rather, she did. I let the rim of the cup touch my lips, barely tasting the steam. The room was silent except for the faint rustle of robes and the sound of the stream outside. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then Clara blinked, her smile faltering just slightly. She took another small sip, her hand trembled. And that's when I leaned in and whispered, quietly enough that only she could hear. Trust needs a dose, remember? Her eyes widened, the first real emotion I'd ever seen on her face. Confusion, then realization. Her lips parted to speak, but no sound came out. The teacup slipped from her fingers and shattered against the floor, scattering porcelain and amber liquid across the wood. Someone gasped. Another screamed. Clara staggered back, her hands clutching at the table. Her breath came out in short, choked bursts, and the calm, composed woman everyone adored began to unravel before our eyes. Noah, I whispered, but he was already moving, catching her as she stumbled. Clara, he said, panicked. Clara, what's happening? Her eyes darted toward me, wild now, desperate, but she couldn't form words. A low sound escaped her throat, half gasp, half groan. Then her body stiffened and she crumpled, shaking violently as the candles flickered around her. The entire room fell into chaos, chairs scraping, voices shouting, cups spilling. Noah shouted for help. The other guests froze in shock. I just sat there, my heart hammering so hard I could barely breathe. The scent of mint filled the air again, sharp, cold, overwhelming, and as Clara convulsed on the floor, her robe pooling around her like a fallen angel's wings, one thought pulsed in my head like a prayer I didn't mean to say. No one loses their mind on their own. The music stopped. The candles hissed. Clara's hand twitched once, then went still. Noah turned to me, eyes wide, his voice trembling. Mom, what did you do? I stared at him, at the broken cup, at the reflection of firelight dancing across the floor. For a moment, I didn't know if I should feel triumph or horror. Maybe both. Then I whispered so quietly he almost didn't hear. I just trusted the process. Everything after the sound of that cup breaking felt blurry and unreal. The candles flickered, people gasped, and Clara fell to the floor. Her white robe spread around her like spilled milk. Her breathing was short and uneven, and Noah was beside her in seconds, shouting her name, shaking her shoulders. I just sat there, frozen, staring at my cup. I hadn't even touched it. The smell of mint and valerian filled the air. It was sharp and heavy, almost bitter. My hands were shaking, and for a moment I thought, this is it. I've lost my mind for real. Then the door flew open. Elena ran in, still in her nurse's jacket, her phone clutched tight. Don't touch her, she cried. I have proof. Noah looked up confused. Proof of what? Elena knelt next to Clara, checking her pulse with quick, steady hands. Then she looked up, her voice trembling but firm. She's been poisoning people. I recorded her last night. Everyone went quiet. Elena plugged her phone into the projector on the wall. A grainy video appeared. The medical room, 2 a.m. There was Clara, calm as ever, standing by the medicine cabinet. She peeled off labels and replaced them. One said melatonin. The new one said lorazepam. Then she poured powder into small packets, the same kind she used for her tea. She's been mixing lorazepam with valerian root, Elena said softly. At low doses, it causes confusion and memory loss. In high doses, it can stop breathing. Noah stared at the screen, his voice breaking. No, she wouldn't do that. Elena opened a folder she had brought with her. Her name isn't even Clara Monroe, she said. It's Claire Montrose. She was sued 5 years ago for drugging her father, slowly, over months, until he lost control of his mind. She took over his finances. She laid a newspaper clipping on the table. Alternative healer accused of elder abuse. Noah's face went pale. She told me her father was healed, that she saved him. Elena's voice was quiet. He survived, but he never recovered. She just moved on to the next person. I looked at my son. He was shaking, eyes full of tears, lips trembling like he couldn't find the words. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "Mom, I didn't believe you. I let her." He couldn't finish. I reached for his hand, squeezed it. "She fooled everyone," I said softly. "But you're here now. That's enough." The paramedics arrived soon after. They carried Clara out on a stretcher. Even then, she looked peaceful, almost like she was sleeping. The woman who had destroyed so many lives still looked like a healer. Elena handed her phone to the officers. "Everything's there," she said. "The recordings, the forged papers." They nodded and thanked her. Then they turned to me. "Ma'am, you're safe now?" For a moment, I didn't feel safe. I felt empty. Like all the noise in my head had stopped, at once. Noah stood beside me, staring at the door where they'd taken Clara. His voice was small. "She could have killed you." I nodded. "She almost did." He turned to me, tears filling his eyes. "I let her hurt you. I didn't see it. I didn't want to." I touched his face, brushing a tear away with my thumb. "You wanted to believe in love," I said. "That's not a crime. It just hurts sometimes." He broke then, leaning into me, sobbing like he did when he was little. "I let her poison the woman who gave me life." I held him close, my heart aching but steady. "Then help me live, Noah," I whispered. "That's how we heal." The next morning, the retreat was quiet again. The candles had burned down to stubs, and the forest outside smelled of wet pine and smoke. Elena came to find me before we left. "They'll take her into custody after the hospital clears her," she said. "You'll need rest, Mrs. Hale." I smiled faintly. "I think I'll sleep just fine now." She smiled back, squeezing my hand before walking away. Noah and I stood by the car. The mountains were covered in mist again, just like the day we arrived. But this time I didn't feel lost inside them. I reached into my coat pocket and felt the soft paper of David's letter, the one that said never drink to forget. He was right. Remembering is what saves us. Morning came gray and cold. Mist hung low over the pines, wrapping the retreat in silence. You wouldn't know that. Only hours ago, the place had been full of panic and sirens. I was sitting on the porch steps when the police cars arrived, lights flashing red and blue against the wet wood. The sound of engines broke the stillness that had settled after the storm. Sheriff Brooks, a broad man with a tired face, stepped out first. He spoke quietly with Elena and two officers, then nodded. They walked toward the main cabin where Clara was being kept under watch. She was still in her white robe, the same one she'd worn during the ceremony. Stains of spilled tea bloomed across the fabric like faded flowers. Her eyes were glassy, distant. She didn't fight or argue when the sheriff read her rights. She just stood there, hands loose at her sides, breathing slowly as if the world around her wasn't real anymore. Elena stood nearby, clutching a folder to her chest, the one filled with everything she'd gathered. The video, the forged license, the medication logs. Her face was pale but steady. When she handed the folder to the sheriff, her voice trembled only once. "These are all the records," she said. "Everything she changed, every patient she touched." Sheriff Brooks nodded. "You did good, Miss Torres." Then he turned to Clara. "Claire Montrose, you're under arrest for attempted murder, medical fraud, and criminal negligence." She blinked slowly, then smiled, that same soft, unsettling smile she always had. "Do you understand your rights?" the sheriff asked. She didn't answer. They took her by the arms and led her toward the waiting patrol car. The hem of her robe dragged along the ground, leaving a trail through the damp gravel. I watched from the porch, my hands folded in my lap. I thought I'd feel relief and maybe even satisfaction, but I didn't. I just felt tired. Noah stood behind me, quiet, watching too. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say. When Clara reached the car, she stopped. She turned her head slightly and looked straight at me. Her eyes were clearer now, sharper, as if the fog had finally lifted from her mind. For a moment, we simply stared at each other, two women who had tried in very different ways to heal something broken. Then I said softly, mostly to myself, "She only ever healed herself with the truth." The sheriff opened the car door, but before she got in, Clara spoke, her voice calm, almost gentle. "I didn't hurt you, Maggie," she said. "I only showed you what people really are. Everyone wants to forget their pain. You were no different." Her smile deepened, faint and eerie. "I just gave you what you wanted." The officers moved to push her into the car, but she looked back one last time, eyes bright with something that wasn't madness anymore, Maybe clarity, maybe pride. I held her gaze, my heart steady for the first time in months. "No," I whispered. "You're wrong. I don't want to forget. I choose to remember." Clara tilted her head, as if she was considering that. Then she laughed, soft, tired, almost human. As they closed the car door, the sound of the lock echoed through the courtyard like the closing of a book. The sheriff spoke briefly with Noah and me before leaving. "The retreat will be shut down," he said. "They'll dig into every file, every name. She won't hurt anyone else again." Elena came to stand beside me. Her eyes were red but peaceful. "It's over," she said quietly. I looked at the mountains behind the retreat, their tops lost in mist. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the faint scent of tea and smoke. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe this is just the part where we finally start remembering." Noah reached for my hand, and for the first time I took it without hesitation. Together we watched the police car disappear down the winding road until its lights were gone. Cedar Valley stood silent behind us, the cabins empty, the candles cold. It didn't feel like a place of healing anymore. It felt like what it truly was, a house of forgetting, and I had no intention of forgetting ever again. 3 months passed. The rain had returned to Ashwood, Oregon, soft and familiar, tapping gently against the window panes of my little cedar house. The world outside was the same, the tall pines, the gray sky, the smell of wet earth. But inside me, everything felt new. My mind was clear again. The fog that had once wrapped around my thoughts was gone. Some days I still forgot small things, where I'd left my glasses, the name of a neighbor's dog. But they were ordinary forgettings, the kind that come with living, not fear. That morning I sat at the piano, the same one David used to play. My fingers trembled a little on the keys as I tried to remember the melody he'd written for me on our 20th anniversary. For a while, I couldn't get it right. Then the notes began to fall into place, slow and steady, like the sound of footsteps returning home. When I finished, I let my hands rest on the keys. The house was quiet again, but it didn't feel empty anymore. The door opened behind me and Noah stepped in, brushing rain off his coat. He looked different these days, older, softer around the eyes. The guilt that once shadowed his face had been replaced by something calmer. "Your playing's better than I remember," he said, smiling. "It should be," I teased gently. "I've had nothing but time to practice." He walked over and set a small stack of papers on the table. "I finally opened the counseling center," he said. "We're calling it the Lantern Room. It's for people who've been manipulated or gaslighted, people who need to find their way back to themselves." I looked up at him, pride and tenderness swelling in my chest. "Your father would have been proud." He nodded, blinking fast. "You too, Mom. You didn't just survive. You remembered who you are." Before I could answer, there was a soft knock at the door. When I opened it, Elena stood there, smiling shyly. She looked well, her hair loose, her posture relaxed for the first time. In her hands was a small brown paper bag. "I brought something for you," she said. She handed it to me. Inside was a simple glass jar filled with loose tea. Real tea, the kind that smelled like summer and quiet mornings. The label read, "Lavender and Peace." "It's safe," she said softly. "No tricks, no doses, just flowers and calm." I smiled. "That's all I need, enough to fill the cup, nothing more." Elena laughed, a little shy. "Exactly." She stayed for lunch, and the three of us sat together, me, my son, and the woman who had risked everything to help me. For once, the air felt light, unburdened. When the rain eased, Noah filled the kettle and poured us each a cup of tea. The steam rose gently between us, curling in soft white ribbons. I held my cup for a long time, watching the steam twist and fade. For months, I couldn't look at a teacup without feeling my stomach turn. But this time, I saw something different. The steam didn't spiral into a snake or an eye watching me from the dark. It rose slowly, curling into the soft shape of a heart, brief, imperfect, but real. Noah noticed me smiling. "What is it?" "Nothing," I said quietly. "Just the right amount." He raised his cup. "To healing." Elena lifted hers too. "To remembering." I nodded, breathing in the scent of lavender. "To peace," I said. We drank together, and for the first time in a long time, the tea was just tea, warm, simple, and honest. The clock had just passed midnight when the phone rang. The sound startled me, sharp and lonely in the silence of the house. These days, not many people called after dark. Noah was long asleep in the guest room, and the world outside was wrapped in fog and moonlight. I hesitated before answering. The number on the screen was strange. No name, no area code I recognized. For a moment, I thought about letting it ring. Then, for reasons I couldn't explain, I picked it up. Hello? There was a long pause. I could hear breathing on the other end, soft, uneven. Then a voice barely more than a whisper. Maggie? I froze. That voice, fragile, familiar, full of something that sounded like regret. It's me, she said, Clara. For a moment I couldn't speak. The house seemed to grow stiller, as if even the air was listening. They're moving me, she went on, to another facility, somewhere farther away. I needed to say I'm sorry. Her voice broke on the last word. There was no smoothness left, no calm tone, no power. Just a tired woman speaking from somewhere cold and far away. I didn't answer right away. My hands trembled slightly as I held the phone. Finally, I said softly, Why now? Because I see it now, she whispered. What I did. What I became. I thought I was healing people, but all I did was feed off their pain. I wanted to believe I could fix others so I didn't have to fix myself. Her words hung there, fragile as glass. I could hear her breathing, the faint echo of hospital noise behind her. Footsteps, a door closing, the hum of fluorescent lights. I felt no anger, no satisfaction, only a quiet, deep ache, the kind that comes when you finally understand someone too late. Clara, I said gently, I don't hate you. She gave a small, shaky laugh. That's worse somehow. There was a pause. Then I spoke again, my voice steady. Listen to me, Clara. The light isn't something everyone should look straight into. It blinds you if you're not ready. On the other end, I heard a faint sob. Then another. Maggie, she whispered. I think you are the only one who ever saw me clearly. Maybe, I said quietly, but that doesn't mean I could save you. The line went silent. For a moment, I thought she'd hung up. Then I heard it. The soft sound of crying, muffled and small, like a child's. I stayed on the line, listening to her tears fade into silence, until finally there was only the faint hum of the connection. Then the call ended. I sat there for a long time, holding the phone in my lap, staring at the dark window across the room. Outside, the moon hung low, pale and still, its reflection shimmering in the half-empty teacup beside me. The steam rose slowly, curling upward in thin, delicate ribbons. I lifted the cup, took a slow sip, and let the warmth settle in my chest. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that feels alive, full of memory, not emptiness. I looked out the window one last time and whispered to the night. Not to Clara, not to anyone, just to myself. As for me, I've seen enough. Then I turned off the lamp, and for the first time in years, the darkness felt gentle. Morning came soft and gold. The forest around Ashwood was wrapped in a thin mist, the kind that makes the sunlight look like it's spilling through silk. The air smelled of pine needles and wet soil. Somewhere far away, a bird called out, slow, steady, like the rhythm of a heartbeat. I walked the narrow trail behind my house, the one David used to take when he wanted to clear his mind. In my hands, I carried a small teapot and 2 cups, one for me and one for the ghosts I couldn't quite forget. The path curved through the tall trees until it opened into a small clearing. The ground was soft with moss, the air still. I knelt there, setting the teapot down in the dirt. The porcelain was warm against my palms. For a long moment I didn't move. I just listened. To the wind, to the creak of the trees, to the faint sound of the world waking up. Then I poured. The tea flowed in a thin golden line onto the earth, soaking into the roots below. Steam rose, curling upward in the morning light, blending with the mist. It wasn't an offering, not really. It was a way of saying I understood now, that healing isn't always gentle, that sometimes peace requires breaking what poisoned you.